At 4:47 a.m. on November 12, 1932, Earl Thompson sat in the cab of his 1929 Ford Model A truck outside a shuttered steel mill in Gary, Indiana. 41 years old, laid-off machinist, owner of a truck he couldn't afford to fuel. Behind him, 17 families slept in their cars, waiting for a soup kitchen that had closed 3 days earlier. The city had 42 bread lines. All of them had run out of bread. Thompson turned the ignition. The engine coughed twice and caught. Nobody knows exactly when he made the decision. Yet his wife would later say he'd been restless for weeks, staring at the truck parked in their yard like it was accusing him of something. The Ford. AA could haul 2 tons. Thompson had been using it to move furniture for families being evicted, taking whatever they could pay. Usually nothing. The truck sat idle most days, burning through their savings in insurance and storage fees. His wife earned cleaning houses. But Thompson had driven trucks for Continental Steel for 9 years before the layoffs. He knew routes. He knew loading docks. He knew which warehouse managers would look the other way at closing time. The first run happened by accident. Thompson had picked up a load of rejected canned goods from a packing plant in Hammond, 40 pounds of dented tins the company couldn't sell. The foreman told him to dump them. Instead, Thompson drove to the closed soup kitchen and left the cans on the steps with a note. Still good inside. By dawn, they were gone. Thompson started driving at night, at the Ford. AA had a 4-cylinder engine that burned oil but ran quiet. He'd learned during his steel mill days that most warehouses kept their loading docks accessible for early morning deliveries. Between midnight and 5 a.m., he could back the truck up to a dock, load whatever had been marked for disposal, and be gone before shift change. Rejected produce from wholesale markets, day-old bread from bakeries, bruised fruit from rail yards, nothing stolen, nothing that would be missed. Just the margins. 'Tis the excess, the almosts, food that capitalism had decided wasn't worth selling, but hunger didn't care about. See that subscribe button? It's our exchange. Your way of saying, "This reached me." Not about the action's size, but its meaning. Hit it if this resonated, drop a like if it moved you, and comment your thoughts on this story. Let's complete this circle together. Thompson developed a system. He'd mark buildings with chalk, small symbols only he understood. A circle meant regular surplus. A cross meant strict inventory. A triangle meant a sympathetic manager. Gary, Hammond, East Chicago, Whiting. The industrial belt along Lake Michigan became his territory, mapped not by streets, but by waste. The Ford AA could do about 40 miles on a tank. Thompson calculated every mile. Route efficiency became survival. He'd fill the truck bed with rejected goods from 3 or 4 stops, then distribute before sunrise. No central location, no organization, no announcement. He'd simply pull up to where people gathered, places everyone knew, but nobody official acknowledged. The vacant lot behind the closed foundry. The rail bridge where men waited for work that never came. The park where families slept in tents made from billboard canvas. People started calling him the night truck. Nobody knew his name. He never stayed long enough for questions. The Ford AA's bed was 6 feet long, 4 feet wide. Do the math, and it's 24 square feet of hauling space. Thompson could stack crates 3 high when the load was light, as 2 high when it was dense. On average, he moved about 800 pounds per night. Not much. But 800 pounds of food split among 70 people meant nobody starved that day. Winter came hard in 1932. Lake Michigan wind cut through Gary like it was collecting debts. Thompson wrapped the truck's radiator in burlap to keep the engine from freezing between stops. His hands cracked from the cold, bleeding onto the steering wheel. The Ford's heater barely worked. He wore 3 coats and still shivered. But winter also meant opportunity. Cold storage facilities had to clear out aging inventory before it spoiled. Meat that was 3 days from expiration, eggs with hairline cracks, milk approaching its turn date. Thompson took it all. The cold kept it fresh long enough. He started seeing other trucks. Copycats, maybe, or just desperate men with the same idea. A Chevrolet half-ton in Hammond, a International Harvester in Whiting. They never spoke, never coordinated, but Thompson would see their chalk marks on buildings, different symbols but same purpose. The night logistics network of the Depression, invisible to everyone who didn't need it. By February 1933, Thompson was hauling 6 nights a week. The Ford AA was burning a quart of oil every 100 miles. The engine knocked on cold starts. Second gear was grinding. He'd replaced the rear tires with retreads that wouldn't last another month. The truck was dying the same slow death as everything else in Gary. But he kept driving. As police knew about the night trucks, they had to. But in a city where unemployment hit 60%, where banks had foreclosed on 4,000 homes, where the city budget couldn't afford to keep streetlights on, enforcing property laws about discarded food wasn't a priority. Thompson was never stopped, never questioned. The unstated agreement held as long as nothing was technically stolen, as long as no one made it official, it could continue. Thompson's wife found out in March. She'd noticed the oil stains in the driveway. That's the mileage on the odometer that didn't match his story about looking for work. She followed him one night in a borrowed car, watched him load rejected vegetables from a wholesaler's dock, watched him distribute them to families at the rail bridge. She never said anything, just started packing sandwiches for him to take on his runs. The Ford AA finally gave out on May 2nd, 1933. Transmission failure on Route 12, halfway between East Chicago and Gary, truck bed loaded with 200 pounds of day-old bread. Thompson sat on the roadside in the dark, watching steam rise from the hood. He didn't have money for a tow, let alone a repair. The bread would mold by morning. 3 trucks stopped. Men Thompson had never spoken to. They unloaded the bread, distributed it among their vehicles, and towed the Ford to a garage in Hammond. The mechanic, who'd been surviving on the night truck network himself, fixed the transmission for $35, paid in installments, no interest. Thompson drove for another year. By then, Roosevelt's programs were starting to penetrate the industrial belt. The CCC put men to work. The WPA opened real soup kitchens with government funding. Food lines got organized, official, documented. The need for night trucks diminished. Thompson sold the Ford AA in June 1934 to a farmer in Indiana for $70, used the money to buy tools, and opened a small repair shop. He fixed trucks mostly, the ones that had been running the same routes he had. He never charged much. The chalk marks, his and others, faded from warehouse walls by winter. Nobody counted how many people Thompson fed. There were no records, no ledgers, no official documentation. That was the point. In a system that had decided certain people didn't count, Thompson and the other night truckers created a different math. Not about numbers, about necessity. The Ford Model A. A Thompson drove was never special. Ford built them by the hundreds of thousands. Just another work truck, designed to haul, designed to break, designed to be replaced. But for 18 months in Gary, Indiana, it was the difference between eating and not eating for people the economy had erased. Thompson died in 1959, 73 years old, owner of a small garage that barely made profit. His obituary was 4 lines in the Gary Post-Tribune. It didn't mention the night runs. Most of the people who remembered were dead or gone, scattered by the diaspora that emptied the industrial belt when the jobs disappeared for good. But in certain families, the ones whose grandparents survived Gary in the 30s, there's a story that gets passed down, about trucks that came in the night, about food that appeared where there should have been none, about chalk marks on walls that meant someone was paying attention. Earl Thompson never called himself a hero. He called himself a truck driver. In the Depression, that was enough. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and if you've heard stories like this from your own family's history.